So we're in our current theme at the moment called Living Buddhism, which is basically how do we practice Buddhism in the modern day, here and now, in the West, in this particular culture. And we're talking about how the founder of the movement translated the Buddhist tradition in a very particular way with particular emphases to give us what we need here and now to be able to practice effectively. So this evening's talk is Accentuating the Positive, and it's going to be looking at how we, in this tradition, we emphasize practices that focus on the positives. So Sangha, the founder of the movement, he taught us some very positive practices in the way that we see them today, because he saw really that that was what the modern West practitioner needs. He saw that that's what we needed. When Buddhism first came to the West, it was often seen as quite negative, even maybe sort of life-denying, or maybe even like a nihilistic tradition. It was seen that way. It was kind of caricatured when it first arrived in the West as kind of Buddhists believe that life is suffering and the world is a really ugly, horrible place, and the goal of the Buddhist spiritual life is just to completely escape from it, to just escape from all of that into some kind of blank nirvana, or like into the void, disappearing into the void. So Sangha, the founder, he pointed out that, well, that would mean that Buddhists would be expected to be fairly miserable people. But actually, you know, Buddhists seem to be quite happy. So what's that all about? So yeah, as we now know, as we see, the Buddhist path involves transforming negative states. That's kind of a very central thing that we do, transforming negative mental states, such as things that we have a lot of in the West, such as stress, anxiety, worry, feelings of isolation, these kind of things. And we try to cultivate a mind that's happy and joyful and free. In fact, these positive, really positive motivations now are what really attracts newcomers to Buddhism often in the modern West. People see it as a very positive tradition. So just to put this in context, like where does that negative view of Buddhism come from? Where did it come from? Well, the first Western scholars, when they first described Buddhism in the middle of the last century, they based their ideas on one particular tradition, the Theravadan tradition of Southeast Asia Buddhism, and they saw that as real Buddhism and ignored the more positive Mahayana and Vajrayana traditions that developed a little bit later. So our founder, Sangha, he was originally from Tooting in London, and then he lived in India from the age of around 20, and he lived as an ordained monk. Come on in. He lived as an ordained monk, and he worked for and taught Buddhism for around 20 years in India, under teachers from many different traditions, before coming back to Britain in the 60s, and setting up a new Buddhist movement, which is what we have today, the movement we've got today. So he was uniquely placed when he was forming the movement to know very well, because he was from it himself, the culture and temperament of Westerners, and also know, so he knew what practices were appropriate and effective for our spiritual progress, but he had the experience of practices and the Dharma taught by teachers from all of the world's Buddhist traditions. So he was uniquely placed to do that. And he recommended, he saw that a negative, maybe a very traditional negative approach to the spiritual life was not going to inspire the average Westerner to make progress. So he incorporated these, some particular emphases into the movement, which is what we're talking about on this theme. And one of which is to accentuate this really strongly positive approach. So that's to put the talk into context, really. So I'll talk about three main three main examples of this really positive approach that we take. So firstly, ethics, the precepts that we aim to live by as Buddhists. So instead of, there's a flip chart. There was a flip chart. So yeah, we try to live by these 5 precepts. Order members take 10 precepts. So instead of focusing, so here we've got the negative precepts and positive precepts. And instead of focusing just on what is unskillful on the left-hand side there, we emphasize the importance of positive action and positive speech and positive thought. So we include these positive precepts in our tradition. So that's the first emphasis that I'll talk about in the talk. And secondly, I'll talk about beauty. So instead of focusing on the ugliness in the world of samsara, in our tradition, we cultivate seeing beauty in the world and seeing beauty in other people. And we recognize that as a glimmer of the highest beauty, which lies beyond when we transcend our usual perspectives. And the third aspect of the talk is I'll talk about positive conditionality and karma. So instead of focusing just on the negative vicious circles of unskillful habits, the negative side of conditionality, like we see in the Wheel of Life where we're going round and round, I'm going to talk about the positive side of conditionality, which is a positive spiral, sometimes called the positive Nidana chain, where positive states give rise to even more positive outcomes. So that's the 3 parts of the talk. So firstly, accentuating the positive in our ethical life. So traditional presentations of Buddhist ethics tend to focus on what we must not do. So for monastics, for monks and nuns, there's a really long list of things not to do. But if we try to practice that way, that could lead us to a kind of an attitude of avoiding ordinary life and avoiding ordinary people, like a special protected kind of existence. And as Westerners, we're very much living in the world. We're really in the world. So if we took those very negative precepts very literally, all those many rules, it could also reduce our capacity to have a positive influence on the world and a positive influence on other people. So for example, monastics are forbidden from handling money, which could, in the modern West, it could make us quite ineffective. And Sangha, the founder, he really emphasized this, that our personal practice should have a positive effect on the world. It should have a positive effect on other people. And he created the movement to incorporate that aspect. And so by emphasizing the positive precepts, not just the negative ones, that allows us to make a really positive effect in the world. So we have these 5 precepts, and we try to accentuate the positive side of that as well, and incorporate that, not just the negatives. So for example, the first precept, not to harm, to really try to live by not causing harm, we would really try to cultivate kindness as the positive aspect of that precept. And with the other precepts, instead of not just taking the not given, we try to really practice generosity in the world. And instead of not craving and being involved in greed in the mind, then we try to cultivate contentment in the mind. And instead of not lying, we try to practice truthful speech. And instead of not clouding the mind and being intoxicated, we try to really cultivate mindfulness, awareness. So those are the positive precepts. And actually, at their highest, these positive aspects of the precepts, they're in line really with the ultimate truth of how things really are, because they're trying to express the interconnectedness of all beings. And this is the Mahayana Bodhisattva ideal. It's another really positive emphasis in our tradition that we're not practicing just for ourselves. but we're practicing for the welfare of the many, for the benefit of all beings. And I think, personally, I think these positive aspects to the precepts can be really, really powerful. They're really significant to me personally. I remember times when things have been really very, very difficult in life. Lots of dukkha, things that I don't have control over, that I just can't sort out. Lots of suffering. And I remember a really strong moment of being in the Red Shrine Room with the women's Mitra Sangha on Sangha Night, and a real moment of like strength and confidence from chanting these positive precepts, because what I kind of sort of bedded into was that no matter what is happening, no matter what's going on actually in the world that we can't control, I will live by these positive precepts and good will come. Like, it's just a very basic law of karma. And there's always something you can do. So there's always a next positive step that can be taken. A tiny step, it could be a very tiny step. But that tiny step is in line with the greater reality, with how things really are. And it will result in positivity, in good. There will be a positive effect. So it's quite a straightforward practice, but very, very strong. We can just keep doing it, and we can just be confident that there will be effects. So that's my experience really of the positive precepts, is that they can kind of give strength and inspiration and direction, actually, a direction and confidence, especially when things are difficult or a bit difficult. Okay, so how can we do it? Like, how can we incorporate these positive precepts into our life? I think we need to maybe start by finding motivation for doing that. We might really want, and I think a lot of people do, really want to just increase the well-being and happiness of the people that we love. You know, we really have that motivation, so we can focus on that intention and trust the positive precepts will bring that about. It will bring more happiness, more joy into the world. And generosity is always a really good place to start with these precepts. Acts of generosity, when we're really caught up in ourselves and we're really struggling, a simple act of generosity, it can really help. It can kind of get things moving. And to really start that off, we need to kind of develop a sense of abundance. We need to feel resourced, we need to feel abundant. And things like very basic practices like the gratitude exercises that we did on the beginner's course. Just noting benefits that we receive every day in our life, very simple things. This can be a really powerful daily practice to make us feel abundant and be able to kind of kickstart generosity. And another way that we can really apply these positive precepts is that we think about the fact that they're about connection, they're about interconnectedness. So we can do things to bring about more connection in our lives, so we can spend time with our friends, we can spend more time in the Sangha, we can go on retreat, we can just connect, we can just communicate, we can join the cleaning team. Tuesday morning. Is it Tuesday morning? Yeah. Yeah, very positive practice. Yeah. Yeah, and of course, meditation and awareness, really important, especially the metta bhavana, because just sitting down and wishing the best for others brings in these really positive aspects of ethics. Okay, so that's the first part of the talk, ethical, positive precepts. So secondly, I'll talk about beauty. We had a full talk on beauty the other week, lovely talk by Sangha Gita. So this is quite a brief section from a slightly different perspective. So some traditional schools of Buddhism interpreted the Dharma as saying that the world is an ugly place. Samsara is ugly, and seeing ugliness is part of insight. That seeing things as ugly is seeing things how they really are. And there are traditional practices to cultivate seeing things that way. So meditating on the loathsomeness of the human body, meditating on the stages of decomposition of a corpse. Okay, so that might not really be for us just now. I mean, they are traditional practices, and actually those practices, they're designed to undermine attachment and craving and sense desire. And actually, under particular traditional conditions, they're very effective practices. But our founder didn't recommend those practices necessarily to us in the modern West. He saw that probably it's not really what we need. It's not really where we need to focus. And instead, he encouraged us to cultivate seeing beauty in the world. He saw that, in fact, counter to the view that seeing ugliness shows us how things really are, that seeing beauty is, in fact, an aspect of true insight into the nature of reality. He pointed out that the Buddha, in the early suttas, expresses his delight in the beauty of the world. His enlightenment showed him this. His insight into the nature of how things really are showed him an unlimited sense of beauty. And we sort of know it. So when we're in these, if we're in fairly negative mental states, negative emotional states, we feel separated, maybe isolated, fearful, anxious, maybe states of ill will, maybe anger. When we're in those states, we're trapped. We feel trapped in our own kind of self-interest, in our own wants, in fear. And when we feel like that, we're cut off from beauty. We don't see things as beautiful. When we're in really positive, unified and refined states of being, when we're happy, when we're relaxed, when we feel connected, when our awareness has a more open quality to it, then we tend to see more beauty in the world. So seeing the beauty in things is an integral part of the perspective that sees into the nature of reality. Its genuine insight has that aspect of seeing things as beautiful, because then we know we're interconnected. We're less cut off, we're less deluded by this separateness. Connection, that radical interconnectedness, connection on its highest level is love. And with love, we see beauty. It's also motivating for us. We're not motivated by ugliness. We naturally move towards and we naturally love what we find beautiful. And conversely, we find beautiful that which we love. It's the nature of how things are, this real interconnectedness, and we can get a sense of it. Okay, so what can we do to help us develop a sense of beauty in the world and in other people? There are a few things we can do in a practical way. It can just help to avoid negative situations, so like negative atmospheres in life, maybe steering away from situations of conflict, complaining, harsh speech, gossip, unkindness, maybe at work, maybe on social media. We can just avoid exposing ourselves to those negativities. And spending time in the natural world can really help us to see beauty. Being in the wild places and being in the peaceful places, we can really get a sense of connection and awe and a real shift in perspective. Spending time offline can help, and time just doing nothing without any input. Just making time to sit and do nothing. Maybe just treat ourselves to a quiet cup of tea, give the mind, give the heart space to relax, space to expand, time to just reflect on the beauty of life. And another emphasis given by Sangha Night is contact with the arts. So contact with music and art in whatever way inspires us and that we love. And again, of course, meditation really helps us to see this. We've probably had that experience maybe on retreat or maybe when we leave the centre after Sangha Night. We come out of meditating in the shrine room and the world just seems more alive. It just seems more colourful and more beautiful. We've got this sense of more perfection to things. Because meditation transforms our mind and it transforms our consciousness very directly. It can open us to the true beauty of things. Okay? So I'll move on to the third and last part of the talk, which is looking at another positive emphasis in our tradition, which is positive conditionality. Okay, so I'll just remind us what I mean when I'm using the term conditionality, sometimes called conditioned co-production or conditioned arising. So this teaching of conditionality is saying that everything whatsoever arises out of the conditions that are in place. It's the central concept taught by the Buddha to explain the nature of existence. He described how everything in samsara is conditioned. Everything is interrelated. Nothing is independent or fixed. And it's the basis of why we can work with our hearts and our minds and our habits. It's the basis of the law of karma. And traditional schools of Buddhism tend to focus on how this conditionality traps us into vicious circles, vicious habit circles. The wheel of life is a well-known symbol of that. How without awareness, our negative habits get deeper and they get stronger, and our task is to break the links in that cycle. So the most important way we can do that, we can remember from the intro course, is to be in the gap. So on the wheel of life, I've not put all the detail of the wheel of life on there, but basically the wheel of life goes round and we are following very entrenched habits. And the main points that I'm going to bring out is contact, where we have a sense contact with something that's happening. We have a feeling, we have Vedana, we feel something from that. And usually we'll act fairly habitually to push away something that feels unpleasant and grasp towards us something that feels pleasant. And this is what we call craving, and we're into craving. But by being in the gap, either between feeling and craving or as we've entered into craving, if we can use that as a gap and do something different, we make a skillful choice using the precepts based on ethics. We base our actions on ethics rather than just on feeling, and then we can get off the wheel. Okay, so that's working in the gap, trying to change our habits. And it's a really valid and a really necessary approach to Dharma practice. But this is only half of the story. This is only part of the story. This is the negative side of conditionality. And the same law of conditionality also applies to the positives, not just the negative cycles. One positive event can lead to another positive event and another positive event. Okay, and we have a positive spiral. It's called the positive Nidana chain or positive spiral, and it's a spiral of ever-increasing positive states of being. These are just labels for those positive states, so you just have to imagine that they're like on a spiral going up, and these are the different levels that we can achieve through practice. So we can practice to encourage this positive spiral. And it can be really effective because it can be really hard to just stop doing the stuff, just to kind of halt the negative links. It can be really hard. We can sort of feel a bit unmotivated. We can feel as though we're just going towards something fairly neutral if we just stop doing the negative stuff. Whereas if we're heading towards these positive states, if we know that these positive states are possible, it can be really motivating and we can really achieve something. So doing the Metta Bhavana, say, because we want to really enjoy loving and kind and happy and fulfilling relationships can be much more motivating than just going, I don't want to hate my neighbour for putting the bin in the wrong place again. It can be just more motivating to look towards the positives. And it can also be more realistic, actually, in helping us to practice effectively where we actually are. Because if we're scattered, if we're distracted, if we're stressed, if we're in negative mental states, then maybe meditating deeply into that to get to the deepest level of craving and cut it out at its roots, it might just not be what we need to be doing. We might need to actually be lifting ourselves out of something negative into positive states. We might need some really happy, positive states of mind to aspire to. So these are the positive states. So I'll just describe them. I won't go into too much detail. I love this teaching. I think it's really, really inspiring. When we can get off the wheel, we can leap onto this lovely spiral and work our way up it. So there's several different representations in the Pali Canon. This is just one representation of a positive Nidana chain, and it has 12 links. There are other ways to represent this. So we're on the wheel, things are not exactly going how we want them to be, we've got dukkha, but if we can manage to get into that gap and get off the wheel onto the spiral, the next stage from dukkha is shraddha, sometimes translated as faith or confidence. And I think this first step can be a really common experience for a lot of people, that dukkha leads to shraddha, dukkha leads to faith or confidence. I think it's often what brings people to the Dharma. Some crisis or some difficulty, maybe just a general sense that things are just not good enough. It can lead to this feeling that there must be more, there really must be more to life. So this feeling like this is not good enough, there must be more, that is dukkha leading to shraddha. That is that first step. It doesn't always feel that positive. But we know there's more. We know we can live a more meaningful life. That is shraddha. We know what we want to do something about it. So dukkha to shraddha, really crucial first step. And then that can lead to joy. Because we've found a path. We've found a path that we know is going to work, and we're just really pleased about it. We're joyful about it. We know we've found what we need. And then joy can lead to rapture. Rapture here, it's a bit of an odd word. It means a physically embodied sense of joy. So it can be physically experienced. And then this rapture, this embodied joy, that can lead to tranquility. This sort of initial excitement can fade and the positivity really deepens, it really beds in. And then that can develop into a deep sense of happiness throughout our whole being, deep sense of happiness. And then this happiness can lead to concentration because our energies are fully behind us now. We're integrated and the whole of us is moving in the same positive spiritual direction. We're really moving towards where we want to be. And then the next stage is really important. It's called knowledge and vision of things as they really are. And it's a glimpse into the true nature of existence, a taste of insight, a taste of transcendent reality. And in the tradition, traditionally, this is seen as a very important stage on the Buddhist path. It's said traditionally that when we reach that stage, it is only a matter of time. It's irreversible. It's only a matter of time, although the tradition does say 7 lifetimes, until we reach enlightenment. But Sangha did teach that this stage is a realistic goal for any seriously practicing Buddhist. And then after that stage, it goes on to the next flip chart. After that stage, we start to move more and more towards transcending conditioned existence as we usually understand it. So we start to disentangle, there's disentanglement. We start to disentangle from our sort of deluded perspectives, our consciousness is becoming clearer and more refined. And we become dispassionate. In a positive sense, we're less assailed by experiences of craving and negativity. And then finally, we're liberated. Our minds and our hearts are free. And then the final stage on the positive spiral is fully knowing that we're liberated. Okay, so that's good news, isn't it? That's very good news indeed. Let's all get on the spiral. So it can seem quite a lofty teaching. But actually, as we continue to practice, we certainly will experience some of these positive states, and we probably already have. I think it's really worth being confident. So how can we encourage these positive states to arise? How do we get to spend time on the lovely spiral and progress through these more positive states of being, more and more and more positive? Well, again, ethics is really important here. When we're skillful, when we're acting skillfully, our conscience is clear. And this can lead to a more positive, happy, clear state of mind. We've got less to worry about. And traditionally it's said that it is another way onto the spiral rather than dukkha to shraddha is through positive ethics. It's another step, it's another way of stepping onto the spiral. I've heard it described as being able to look clearly behind and in front of oneself. So we can look into our past, we can look into our future with a completely clear conscience. And that out of that, there's a great sense of confidence and joy that arises, and then we're on the spiral. And of course, meditation, so some people might recognize some of these states. Some of these states are describing states of dhyana in meditation that can be accessed directly in deep states of concentration, in deep states of meditation. And the metta bhavana, again, is a really very important positive practice. Giving ourselves the conditions and actually giving ourselves permission to experience positive states of mind. Just meditating on loving, happy relationships and well-wishing is really crucial for being in a positive state of mind. Sangha recommended alternating, doing the metta bhavana every other day at least, if not every day, if we can. And just more sort of generally outside meditation, we can just try to develop positivity. We can truly value our own well-being and our own happiness. It's really worth valuing. We can see it as a necessary support for spiritual development in a much higher sense, to move up that spiral. So to move up that spiral, we really need to take seriously our need to cultivate positive states of mind. We need to give ourselves positive conditions to be able to do that. It's really crucial. So we need to do very basic things like we need to reduce everyday stress wherever we can. We need to really look after ourselves. We need to value our own happiness. It's not an additional extra, optional extra. It's crucial to the spiritual life. The positive spirals, they're the path to enlightenment, and they're ever increasing positive states. So it's really crucial that we do everything we can to develop positivity. So we can do things to just bring more positivity into our life in quite a basic way. There's things we can do. Just looking after ourselves with good diet and good exercise. Having fun, just really having fun. Connecting with friends that we love. Making time to rest, just have a break, going on holiday. Relaxing, reading inspiring Dharma if we love doing that, walking in nature, being in Sangha, going on retreat, really good ways to just develop a bit more positivity. Okay, so really good ways to develop, create these positive conditions and move up the spiral. So that's the end of the talk. Thank you.